Macron blocks EU plan to let Ukraine buy British Storm Shadow missiles. Europe accelerates push for military independence from US, and how US denies pressuring Ukraine to give up Donbas. The latest news next. The administration of US President Donald Trump has allegedly told Ukraine that security guarantees depend on Kyiv's flexibility on the territorial issue. However, the White House denies this, according to the Financial Times and Reuters. In particular, the Financial Times, citing as many as 8 sources, wrote that the administration of US President Donald Trump had made it clear to Ukraine that security guarantees depended on whether Kyiv agreed to a peace deal. At the same time, the peace agreement will most likely require the transfer of Donbas to the Russian regime. In particular, the Kremlin has already made statements that the so-called territorial issue is key in the negotiations. In exchange for the withdrawal of troops from Donbas, the US may offer Ukraine more weapons to strengthen its peacetime army. At the same time, one senior Ukrainian official told the Financial Times that Kyiv is increasingly losing confidence that the US will commit to providing security guarantees and implementing the agreement. He says the US stops every time security guarantees are about to be signed. In general, the agency writes that Kyiv demands a firm confirmation of guarantees before ceding territory. But the US believes that it is Ukraine that should give up Donbas and is not putting pressure on Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, the White House, according to Reuters, has denied that it is demanding Ukraine give up territory in exchange for security guarantees. This is totally false. The US's only role in the peacemaking process is to bring both sides together to make a deal, says Anna Kelly, Deputy Press Secretary for the US administration. Another source told the agency that Washington does not intend to and is not trying to impose any territorial concessions on Ukraine, and both sides, Ukraine and Russia, must agree to a peace deal. No one can dictate that Ukraine should give up Donbas. It is Ukrainian territory, and any suggestion that Kyiv should cede it in exchange for security guarantees is completely unacceptable. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine are non-negotiable, and any peace process must respect that fundamental principle. Ukrainians' position is clear. Territorial concessions will not be made without concrete, credible security guarantees, and the Donbas remains an inseparable part of the country. Despite rising defense budgets across most EU countries, Europe faces serious gaps in weapons production that will require $1 trillion and at least a decade to close, the Wall Street Journal reports. European countries have significantly increased production of artillery, ammunition, armored vehicles, ships and submarines. Thus, the German defense manufacturer Rheinmetall produces 1.5 million 155mm artillery shells per year, surpassing the United States by this metric. Meanwhile, MBDA, a European missile systems company, has quadrupled production of air defense missiles. However, output still totals only 40 missiles per month, a quantity that Ukraine can expand in just a couple of nights. At the same time, the continent still lags in the production of stealth aircraft, long-range missiles, and satellite reconnaissance. About budgets and fragmentation, total EU defense budgets reach $560 billion, twice as much as 10 years ago, but still less than the Pentagon budget of $850 billion. By 2035, Europe plans to reach 80% of US spending, but the main problem is fragmentation. France demonstrates a high level of independence, while Germany and Eastern European countries continue to purchase US and South Korean weapons, maintaining independence. Need for unity. The creation of a single European military pillar or a unified army has ceased to be an idea of bureaucrats and has become an urgent necessity. Achieving real independence from the United States will require at least 10 years and significant investment. Examples involving precision weapons such as HIMARS show that serial production of domestic equivalents will take years. Fragmentation and prioritization of national defense companies also complicate joint procurement and implementation of major projects, as seen with the FCAS fighter jets. The European Parliament temporarily suspended consideration and approval of a trade agreement with the United States after President Donald Trump announced possible tariffs against several EU countries, creating uncertainty and halting the approval process. French President Emmanuel Macron, in an address to the country's armed forces, emphasized the need for Europe to focus on developing its own long-range weapon systems in response to the Russian Oreshnik missile, whose range covers the territories of European states. Disagreements have intensified within the European Union over the use of a European loan for Ukrainians' military purchases, particularly regarding the procurement of weapons outside the EU. According to The Telegraph, France opposed easing the rules that would allow Ukraine to use a European loan to purchase British-made weapons, insisting that funds from the new financial instrument should be spent exclusively within the EU, with priority given to the European defense industry. According to The Telegraph, citing documents from the EU's new defense plan, Paris did not support an initiative to simplify the procurement of British Storm Shadow cruise missiles for Ukraine on the 90 billion euros loan, a large share of which is intended to finance arms supplies for the Ukrainian armed forces. EU disputes. The report said a coalition of 11 EU countries had proposed loosening existing restrictions to allow Kyiv to buy British weapons using the loan, but France wanted the money to be spent inside the bloc. Under current rules, two-thirds of the funds must go to European and Ukrainian manufacturers, limiting purchases outside the EU. Ukrainians need and dispute over Storm Shadow missiles. Documents seen by The Telegraph indicated that Ukraine estimates it will need 24 billion euros worth of military equipment produced outside the EU in 2026, largely for US-made Patriot air defense system and PAC-3 interceptors, while long-range missiles were also identified as a key unmet need. In this context, Storm Shadow missiles were considered a possible solution, with proponents suggesting a four-tier priority system that would give the UK a higher place in the procurement chain if it could meet Ukrainians' need. Political motives and critique. A diplomatic source said France rejected the idea, arguing for the EU's strategic autonomy. The newspaper noted that Paris was leading efforts to reduce dependence on allies, particularly the US, amid strained relations with President Donald Trump. The stance has drawn criticism within the EU, with Baltic and Nordic states, as well as Poland, Romania, Czechia, and the Netherlands reportedly backing attempts to curb French influence. The source added that 8 more countries, including Germany, favored a more flexible approach toward the UK but had not formally joined the coalition. France, the report recalled, has not joined the US-led Pearl initiative to supply weapons to Ukraine, while saying it is ready to provide support through other mechanisms and stressing the need to strengthen the EU's own defense capabilities. France plans to hold large-scale Orion 26 military exercises lasting nearly 3 months, involving forces from around 24 countries, with the active phase beginning on February 8th and running through late April. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said that Berlin has no capacity to transfer additional Patriot systems to Ukraine from its own reserves, according to Deutsche Welle. Commenting on Kyiv's request to increase supplies of air defense ammunition, Pistorius stressed that Germany had already made a disproportionately large contribution by transferring more than a third of its own Patriot arsenal to Ukraine. He said further deliveries are currently impossible, as the Bundeswehr is waiting for replacement systems while also needing to retain capabilities for personnel training and technical maintenance. At the same time, Pistorius acknowledged that the number of RST air defense systems delivered to Ukraine is also insufficient. He noted that Germany remains the only country able to supply these systems to Kyiv and is doing so, in a sense, on a permanent basis. However, given the sharp increase in the intensity of Russian attacks, previous deliveries are still not enough. Addressing Ukraine's Western partners, the German defense minister urged allies to conduct a joint inventory of their own weapons stockpiles, especially in countries that may still have available reserves. Pistorius separately sharply criticized Russia for systematic strikes on Ukrainians' energy infrastructure, calling such actions particularly cynical. He said that against the backdrop of talks in Abu Dhabi on a possible ceasefire, Russia was continuing with relentless cruelty and brutality to attack civilian energy facilities during a harsh winter, carrying out terror against the Ukrainian population and grossly violating international law. That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.